Wisconsin State Capital programming is made possible with support from Quick Trip, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139. Wisconsin Eye is an independent, nonprofit public affairs broadcast network. Watch Wisconsin Eye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wisi.org.
$4 billion. $2.4 billion of that is in income tax relief. That's $1,000 for the average family in Wisconsin. That's real money that can be spent on Main Street, in local stores, restaurants, bars, the businesses that are really struggling in Wisconsin. It could also be used to pay down debt, to invest in retirement. So we're excited about this budget, but I just wanted to, I should probably start out by thanking the co-chair for all of his hard work in the Assembly, and co-chair Mark Line, who couldn't be here today, but they just did a fantastic job with the finance team from a process standpoint, getting this budget through, and we're excited that it received bipartisan support in both houses. But what I want to highlight today is what will happen if the governor actually vetoes this budget. If he vetoes this budget, we lose funding for hospitals that we put into the budget. We lose funding for nursing homes. There are 7 UW buildings that aren't going to be done if the governor vetoes this budget. There's all kinds of things. It's hard to put into picture just everything all the good things that we put into this budget. Funding for mental health beds, funding for school mental health. If he vetoes it, we don't hit the MOE. That puts $2.5 billion of federal funding at risk. And most importantly, if he vetoes this budget, we lose out on $3.4 billion of tax relief for the hardworking people of the state of Wisconsin. So I'm really excited about the budget that we are going to send to the governor. We're hopeful that he's going to sign it. I think he's going to sign it. But with that, I will turn the mic over to the co-chair, Representative Bourne.
Thank you. Good morning. So when legislative Republicans crafted this budget, we were fortunate that we had responsible budgeting for the last decade that set us up with a large surplus. And to me, there's 3 priorities that you should have then with that surplus. This is really what this budget is, 3 priorities. Investing in priorities, the important things for the people of Wisconsin. Putting some money aside, the rainy day fund, record levels, $2.1 billion. And then third, and probably most importantly, because it's their money, sending some of that money back to the hardworking taxpayers of Wisconsin. And we were able to accomplish that in this budget, all 3 of those goals. And we did that by listening to the people of Wisconsin. We did our road show as we always do. We enjoy that in the committee. That's an important part of the budget process, and we don't just say that. We like to get out and hear from folks. We also do it as individual legislators, senators, representatives. We go to our districts, we talk about the budget, we listen to our constituents, and then we invest in their priorities. And that's what you see throughout this budget. Historic investments, Senator mentioned some of them. Historic investments in health care, $100 million into hospitals, $440 million into our long-term care facilities and the workforce that makes the magic happen there. The difficult work they went through in the last year through this pandemic, but also throughout. They were challenged in that workforce. They're taking care of our most vulnerable. The legislature has made significant investments now in 2 straight budgets. This is a budget the governor needs to sign in its entirety when it arrives at his desk. It's a reasonable, responsible, and realistic budget. It invests in priorities. It sets money aside, and most importantly, it sends money back to the people of Wisconsin. We in the legislature, as their representatives, have faith in the people of Wisconsin. The governor's budget placed too much focus and belief in government and bureaucracy and welfare expansion. We trust the people of Wisconsin. It's their funds. The money's coming back to them. The governor needs to sign this budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair of the committee, Amy Loudenbeck.
Good morning. So this was my fourth cycle of being on the Joint Finance Committee, and it's interesting to see the recurring issues that arise budget after budget. A few things that we were, I think, able to do because we did our due diligence was to kind of make good on the promises that the state had made and in some cases underfunded. So if you look at anything from the nursing homes to the ambulance reimbursement rates, or let's take a look at childcare. We heard over and over again when we were on the road and from our constituents that families need reliable childcare so they can go to work or go to school. What happened with Wisconsin Shares is over a period of time, the value of the subsidy of the voucher to the provider had really eroded in value. So it was at the point where families that are eligible for Wisconsin Share subsidies were only able to access about 30% of market rate slots across the state. And so you have people that are eligible for a benefit, but they can't get access to that service. So we used existing dollars within TANF to restructure and reprioritize areas of the most need, and we're able to achieve a subsidy rate that will give 65% of slots across the state, open those up to those families, and really help provide stability to the industry. And again, we could look at that argument, the same thing for hospitals or other things, where we provide a benefit and we need to fund it. Things like 2/3 funding for education. We achieved that goal that has been sort of out there for a number of years, and we just were never able to get there. So using using existing funding, we were able to address the priorities of things that we heard. We heard about stewardship when we were out doing our public hearings and a lot of things from in the district. So we restructured so that we could obligate 4 more years of bonding at current levels for the program, but we were able to actually replace about $8 million of that bonding with cash and focus our bonding on property maintenance, on trails, on access, things that people want to be out and recreating, and took the cash portion from the segregated forestry fund and we'll use that to purchase the large tracts of working lands, so that we're really, again, keeping a similar level of funding and a similar level of commitment, but restructuring how those dollars go into the areas of the highest need. Same thing with increasing funding for reimbursement for high-cost special education and high-cost transportation. Continuing, rather than investing in new programs, investing in the obligations that we have made and strengthening those commitments in a time where we have a surplus, but we're also able to take what we don't need to grow government and return that to the hardworking taxpayers. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the co-chair for questions.
And before Majority Leader Lemieux and I can take some questions, I want to mention one thing that I forgot. Reference Bureau informed us this morning that this budget has the most legislative votes in a generation. The most legislators voted for this budget since 2001. So with that, we can take some questions.
Yep.
Do you know when you'll send the budget to the governor? Or has that already been asked?
We've been discussing that this morning. It'll be fairly soon.
You raised the concern about the outright veto of the budget and be more common for government to veto. Are you worried that he might get creative given that the veto powers of the governor in Wisconsin are pretty vast, that he might come up with some language that's not what you intended?
I think the intent of the Finance Committee the entire time was to produce a budget that did have very, very few new policies, new programs, very few words involved. And I think you guys did a great job of that on the Finance Committee. I think the budget was 400 pages, yep. And most of that is essentially appropriations. So you're right, the governor does have probably the broadest line item veto power in the country, but we're confident that we have a good product, and for the sake of Wisconsin, he should sign it in its entirety.
And if he does use that line item veto to change things, then he's changing things that are important. Like I talked about, the investments that people of Wisconsin want. So then he's going to have to, do things to work against that. And I would certainly encourage him not to do that.
Although it is rare, say he does veto the entire budget, of course, that would put over $2 billion after this. Is there a backup plan, or are you just kind of wait and see for now?
Our job is to produce a budget by the end of the fiscal year, which is what we did yesterday. And we think it's a great budget, a responsible budget, a budget that benefits the entire state of Wisconsin. And we're confident the governor is going to sign it. I think when the minority leader votes for a budget, maybe that clues us in that the governor might sign it, the entire budget.
Do you think you'll send it to him before the weekend?
That has not been determined yet.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.